All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. It's Maddie here, and today we're going to be showcasing all of the best, most creative decks that did really well at our last weekend's tournament, but didn't necessarily reach the very top of the standings, and of course, were mentioned in Meta Monday. So we've been doing this, basically once a week because we run our own tournament series now. I like to highlight a bunch of players and a bunch of really unique deck lists, things that are kind of off meta that still had winning records in, of course, the largest Pokemon Pocket Tournament series. Before we do that, though, I got to let you guys know about the 5th tournament this upcoming weekend here on October 25th at noon Eastern. This is the final showdown, guys. This is the last tournament of Pokemon Pocket before the 1-year anniversary. So basically your final opportunity to play Pokemon Pocket as we know it right now. The champion of this tournament will be dubbed by me the champion of Pokemon Pocket entirely, at least for the next year or so. So yeah, $250 in the prize pool. Shout out to box.gg. Very, very fun. Definitely would recommend that you guys go and play. Link to register down in the description below. All right, let's get right into it. Is B1 out yet? Do we have any B1 news? Any announcement trailer? No? Okay, well, we're still waiting for that, but it'll come soon, and I will talk about it for sure when it comes out. But anyway, let's get into the decks here. Again, every one of these decks was played this past weekend at our tournament and had a winning record, and we've selected a handful of some of the most unique decks for sure. So definitely go and try these out. I think that there's a bunch of really strong decks, really cool decks that have opportunities to do well. They just don't necessarily catch on, and they're not like super popular. So that's really what this video is all about. This first deck here from BLVK, I guess Black, or however he wants to be pronounced here, was playing the Lycanroc, Lucario kind of fighting toolbox package. And I think we saw this a little bit last week. Lycanroc here is pretty cool because you can play the Rockruff with Signs of Evolution. You can thin out your deck, which is always a really strong ability. And then we have Lycanroc EX, which does hit for 130 with Lucario is 150. That is a nice sweet spot there for the break points. We can take KOs. And then we have the, of course, non-EX Lycanroc with Bloodfang, which potentially can be really useful in a lot of matchups as well here in Tyrogue. So this is just sort of a nice little fighting toolbox deck. It's a little bit more aggressive. Theoretically speaking, it has some like power to it in the mid to late game with Lycanroc, 150 HP with Lucario's fighting coach buff. It can do 150 damage, and we are playing Red and Giovanni. So the whole idea here is to, be a pretty, aggressive deck list with Tyrogue and whatnot. And of course the Bloodfang Lycanroc. But at the end of the day, we're a little bit more of like a tempo-based fighting type deck that, actually has a lot more reach than you might think. The fighting type cards in Pokemon Pocket are some of the least played cards in the game. And I was actually really surprised to see a number, like multiple different sort of fighting toolbox decks do well and actually make day 2. I believe this was one of the players that made top cut at the tournament and won the first round too, I believe. So again, he did really well. He had a 6-3 record, which is very, very respectable. Again, won a bunch of games. He ended up only losing to Charizard, Giratina, Darkrai, and Guzzlord, but beat a bunch of lightning decks, beat Turbo Dark Arceus, beat a Charizard as well. Fighting is not bad, realistically. It's just not a bad type. It's just not like the best type in the game. And I think, of course, lightning type decks are very common right now. So hopefully next season, maybe we see a little bit of reprieve for these fighting type decks, because I like some of these cards. They just feel a little bit lackluster, but the right deck, when you put it together properly, can be really good. Shout out to Lycanroc. Shout out to BLVCK. This player went 6-3, made day 2. Next up, though, we have the BioWiz. So we actually showcased this player on our stream in day 2. Another player that went 6-3, playing like a fighting toolbox deck. This was going to be like a fossil toolbox deck, which I do really, really like. Again, we showcased this on stream. This is one of my favorite decks that I've really ever seen this season, and that's because it's playing mostly fossils, right? We have 2 Old Amber, 2 Skull Fossil, and we do have 1 Rampardos, 1 Aerodactyl, 2 Granados. So the whole idea with this deck list is to use these fossil Pokemon pretty consistently. They are very important to the deck, but of course fossil Pokemon don't count as basic Pokemon when they're in your deck list. So that means we can't search them with Pokeball, which does leave this deck to be very unique in the sense that we don't have to play any Pokeball, because the one actual basic Pokemon, Rockruff, is guaranteed to be our starting Pokemon every game. And then we can Signs of Evolution, go into Lycanroc, and then potentially have, Aerodactyl or Rampardos on the back line. Aerodactyl, it's an interesting card. I actually put this like in the A tier, I think, or B tier of one of my recent EX tier list. I think Aerodactyl EX is a good card and has a lot of potential. In fact, moving forward into the Mega Evolution season of B1. Primeval Law is a strong ability. It's just really tough because fighting doesn't have that many good Pokemon. So if you're playing Aerodactyl, you're probably going to end up just playing it like this with Rampardos, which is probably the best fighting type card. So a very unique way to play, a fossil based deck list like this. We don't have any fossil search or any fossil support. I think fossil Pokemon are kind of broken broken, but in the same vein, they're also like a little bit inconsistent, right? So it kind of depends on how you look at it. Rampardos is super strong. The Aerodactyl Primeval Law effect, although right now isn't super relevant, can be really strong in future metagames. I think that this ability will remain relevant, and as we see here, the Bloodfang Lycanroc. So this is a deck that can get over Oricorio. It can go through a lot of the lightning decks very, very easily. One of my favorite decks, you know, it's just fighting decks are just not very common, right? So to see multiple fighting decks make it into day 2 of our tournament this past weekend, I wanted to showcase them because they are just super, super cool decks. So the BioWiz here, he ended up losing to Giratina Darkrai, losing to Exeggutor, Meowscarada, and Buzzwole. Got pretty unlucky to play like multiple grass type decks in a format where there's not many grass type decks. He did beat Decidueye, but beat Giratina Darkrai, beat Suicune Palkia, beat Guzzlord, beat Tapu Koko, beat Flareon. So this deck list here beat a lot of the best decks in the game. And honestly, as I watched this deck on stream, I realized the strength of it. This might be potentially kind of the best like fighting deck. Actually, sorry, not this one, my bad. I gotta go back. This might be like the best fighting deck. The other one's good too, but this one might actually be like one of the better fighting decks that we've had for a very, very long time. So if you guys are interested in playing fighting, again, lightning is very, very common in the metagame right now, especially on ranked mode. So I wanted to showcase these decks because again, they're really, really, really cool. Speaking of grass, Grant here from Brazil was playing Exeggutor with Meowscarada. So this is a really interesting deck. This is like a grass toolbox deck. We show these from time to time. This player here went 4-3, just missed out on day 2, but, you know, Meowscarada with the Stomp Exeggutor, this is the 1 energy attack cost Exeggutor, is pretty interesting, right? So you flip a coin, if heads, you do 30 more damage. This is effectively the same card as Exeggutor EX, but it's not an EX Pokemon, it's just a single prize Pokemon. Really not a bad thing to just be kind of parked into the active spot. It can whittle away at your opponent, and then you can kind of spend some time getting Meowscarada set up. I do like this deck. Again, it's just grass has so many, all of its Pokemon are like evolution Pokemon, and the only grass type deck that has like any quality basics is Buzzwole, which is a really strong deck, but Meowscarada especially I think has a lot of potential moving forward into the Mega Evolution set, mainly because of Leaf Cape. It goes up to 170 HP, and most Mega Pokemon probably won't be able to KO Meowscarada, whereas Meowscarada hitting for 130 times 2 can 2-hit KO them, right? So basically, if you're playing a single prize Pokemon that can 2-hit KO a 3-prize Pokemon, but also gets 2-hit KO'd by those 3-prize Pokemon, inevitably, you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. So I actually really like Meowscarada. Fire type's been pretty common, I would say, in the metagame. Realistically, we have Flareon, we have Charizard, which are things that Meowscarada doesn't love, but this was a pretty unique grass type deck. We are playing the Temporal Leaves Celebi, another card that potentially could be really relevant for some grass toolbox decks moving forward, mainly because of that attack and its ability to devolve Pokemon. I think a lot of the Mega Pokemon that are coming in B1 are likely going to be evolution Pokemon. Celebi is a way to not only devolve your opponent's Pokemon, but at the same time deal damage, potentially just KOing them, right? So a really interesting sort of deck list here. I think that this is something to look out for. Again, they went 4-3 at our tournament this past weekend, but I think going into B1, things like Meowscarada and Celebi have a lot of potential. So I wanted to showcase them. I wanted to showcase Grant's deck. Shout out to Grant. Really, really cool deck. Next up, another grass deck. I'm Vappy from Sweden. He was playing Beedrill EX. So again, Beedrill EX is one of the more interesting Pokemon that we've really ever had. And this is going to be kind of a throwback, right? Meowscarada and Beedrill. We saw like a couple seasons ago, there was a couple of different grass type decks that were either playing, you know, Meowscarada with Decidueye EX or Meowscarada with Beedrill EX. Both were like pretty okay decks. In fact, I think that especially given the metagame right now and how things are kind of changing towards the end of the season, towards a lot of those Darkrai decks, a lot of those Turbo decks, a lot of Lightning decks, that really is kind of where the metagame right now is if you're not playing Suicune, which I think that the grass type decks all actually have really strong advantages into, and I find that to be very, very cool. And it's just something to kind of keep in your mind. I think that there's a lot of different grass type Pokemon. It's kind of in a similar spot to fighting, although I would say that grass is a lot more support than fighting with Leaf Cave with Erica's. This deck is playing entirely stage 2 Pokemon, so it just plays Lily instead. But theoretically speaking, grass is a lot more support than fighting. But a lot of the Pokemon are like pretty good. They're just not like considered to be like super good, you know what I mean? So it's a weird dynamic, but Beedrill is very interesting. I think that especially against something like a Suicune, Beedrill EX could be absolutely incredible just sitting in the active spot, 200 HP with Leaf Cave, double Lily in your deck, just discarding the energies off Suicune. It could be extremely relevant as sort of a solo Pokemon in the active spot against a Suicune EX, and I find that to be really cool. Meowscarada with red can one-hit KO Suicune as well. I know these decks saw play in a tournament where we banned Greninja, so they definitely maybe had a little bit more of an easier time given like the meta pool and just the cards in the metagame being mostly like Lightning and Dark, right? Because those are the best types other than Suicune. So keep that in mind. But I think Grass is actually really interesting. So shout out to Beedrill. Been a long time since I saw Beedrill do pretty well. But again, 4 and 3, just missed top cut. Definitely a very fun deck. So big shout out to I'm Vappy. Definitely an interesting deck here. Next up is going to be Frog EX, Zorino. So, a lot of the Frog EX players, some of the best players in the entire game, their sort of team, their faction. Zorino, no exception to that, from France, and he was playing Solgaleo EX and Giratina EX with Duskmane Necrozma. This might be, in fact, one of the most interesting decks that we've seen all season. The Frog EX players know how to cook up some absolute heat. They just play some really interesting stuff sometimes. So, this is Solgaleo EX, but we are playing Duskmane Necrozma, one copy of Dawn, which I really think is cool, and Lusamine, right? So, Duskmane Necrozma is theoretically an Ultra Beast, right? That can hit for 100 damage and is a Steel-type Pokemon. We're also playing Necrozma to move in and out of the active spot if we need to, right? So these are Pokemon that can get around Oricorio specifically very, very easily and very consistently, and they can also just act as very quality Pokemon. Giratina EX in this deck list. I assume we're playing Metal Energies, but Giratina EX can kind of pump itself up while we're getting set up, which is a really, really unique strategy. This is a deck list that I literally have never seen before, but like seeing it in action is actually really, really cool. Duskmane Necrozma saw a little bit of play, especially in like non-EX format tournaments for the last couple of seasons. It's a relatively strong card, and because it's an Ultra Beast, you can use Lusamine with it, which is pretty cool. 110 HP, Steel type. Definitely not a bad Pokemon, but yeah, Giratina, Solgaleo, Duskmane Necrozma, Celesteela with Lusamine with Dawn. It's just a super unique deck list. And I think Solgaleo is actually a little bit underrated. I'm not going to lie. The ability to hit for 120, we do play Guzma and Red in the deck, so we can take some pretty useful KOs. And in the same vein, like Giratina is just going to be there. So whether or not we kind of lead Giratina and then into like a Suicune or whatever, we can just sort of Broken Space Bellow in their face a couple of turns, maybe hit them for 130, then go into Duskmane Necrozma. It's a very interesting deck. It really, really is. Now, we don't have like any extra draw support, so the Solgaleo strategy isn't the most consistent thing in the world, but again, we do have Cosmog, right, with Celesteela, with Duskmane. These are Pokemon that can all free retreat if Celesteela is in play, so we can teleport with Cosmog, go into either of these Pokemon, maybe stall for a little bit, maybe Broken Space Bellow on the back line, maybe we go 2-2 prize lineup, maybe we go Solgaleo into Giratina. You never really know. It's a really interesting deck, one of my favorite things that I saw really all tournament. I wish that he did kind of just get one more win and make it into day 2. But he did lose to Raikou Luxray and lost to Flareon, and then ended up just losing to his partner here, his teammate Froggy X Narumi, in the last round of the tournament, who ended up going 8-3 and had a really good run. I think he ended up being the highest placing Dragonite deck. So yeah, it's really interesting. Just one of the more like cool decks, I think, which I definitely wanted to highlight in this video. I mean, have you guys ever seen that? Maybe you guys have seen this before, but I mean, I'm somebody that really pays attention to like successful decks, like top decks in the metagame. So this is not something that I'm familiar with. If you guys have seen this before, let me know. If Zorino's watching this video, comment down below, give me some any insight. If any of the players in this, that we featured in this video are watching, definitely comment down below, give us some insight. Shout out to you. Shout out to all these players for participating and playing really, really cool deck lists. That's why I like to make this video, is because, we do the tournaments, we do Meta Monday, we highlight the, the successful decks, the winners of the tournament, but there's so many players that are really great players that played really, really unique, cool deck lists that deserve to be showcased, even if they don't go like 8-1 or whatever, you know what I mean? So that's where we're at right now. Shout out to all of these players. Shout out to this deck. This deck is super, super cool. Shout out to Solgaleo as well. Interested to see where a lot of these Pokemon stand after we go into the Mega Evolution metagame, you know what I mean? I think that a lot of people have some interesting assumptions as to what the metagame will look like, but I just don't think we know. There's going to be so many cards that are coming out in the 3 booster packs of B1, it's really going to change things around a lot. Next up is Barte from the United States playing Luxray and Raikou. So again, a really, really interesting deck to be playing in a tournament where there is no Greninja or Suicune. This player lost to Giratina Darkrai twice and lost to Flareon, but did beat Espeon Sylveon, did beat Zorino, did beat Guzzlord, and then beat a Sweets Relay deck as well. So definitely an interesting list. I like Raikou EX a lot. This is a deck that's playing 2 Raikou, 2 Oricorio, and then Luxray, and of course Volkner. So this is a deck that, theoretically would be exceptionally strong into Suicune. Just funny in a week where we kind of banned Greninja Greninja, so nobody was playing Suicune. But, you know, Luxray is definitely one of those Pokemon that has been pretty decent. You know, I think a lot of these Pokemon that are strong, but are very reliant on a specific supporter card are just inherently a little bit inconsistent, right? We have a lot of these types of cards, things like Togekiss, right, with Cynthia, Garchomp with Cynthia, Volkner is another one with Luxray. There's some more that I'm not really thinking about at the moment, maybe even Skarmory to an extent, but maybe less of an extent with Jasmine. But in general, Luxray is actually a really, really strong Pokemon into Suicune Greninja because you can snipe the bench and 1-8 the active hitting for weakness on a Suicune, but you can snipe a Greninja on the bench, which is super relevant. Raikou EX, Legendary Pulse, draws cards. You can find the rare candy to get into Luxray a bit more consistently. It's a really, really fun deck. And I think, again, there's so many lightning type Pokemon that at this point, people really have kind of narrowed down what they want to play. Excuse me, in terms of like real meta contending lightning type decks, but there are so many really cool lightning decks. And this is definitely one of the more interesting ones that I wanted to showcase. So shout out to Bart or Barte. I don't know how to say the name. Maybe it's Bert. I don't know. Who knows, man? I have no idea. From the United States, though, shout out to the USA, playing Raikou. Anything Raikou is my favorite. You know, last season, early on, I played Raikou and Tapu Koko, my Raikoko deck, and it was one of my favorite decks that I've ever played. And I was very successful with it on the rank ladder until everybody played Giratina, Darkrai, and Guzzlord to counter Suicune. It was kind of a tough moment. I had to swap off of Raikou and Tapu Koko, but definitely Raikou, one of my favorite Pokemon in the game. I like it because it's good, but it's not like overpowered. You know, it feels balanced. It definitely could have been better, but it's definitely not a bad Pokemon. And Legendary Pulse is just kind of broken. So anyway, there we go. Shout out to him. Shout out to his deck. Next up is Sixth Star, who also went 4-3. He was playing Gyarados EX with Silvally. That's right. I mean, we're literally playing Turbo Water Silvally with Gyarados EX. If there's any deck that I've ever seen in Pokemon Pocket that I absolutely love, it is something like this. Turbo Silvally with Lightning type, I've seen a bunch of play, right? I mean, Silvally is an exceptional Pokemon going second, but going first, it's not that good. That's why the baby Pokemon exist. Silvally's a colorless Pokemon. We can play any baby Pokemon and theoretically attack on our second turn going first with Silvally. That is broken. That is exceptionally strong. But why not just play it with our big man Gyarados? Why not, right? The classic Gyarados EX. 140 for 4 energies. Listen, I actually think Gyarados is kind of broken. It is in itself a bit of a counterplay to Suicune. Again, no one played Suicune in this tournament, but a very interesting Pokemon. We are playing Guzma, no damage modifiers here. So, you know, anything that's like Giant Cake, we probably won't be KOing, but very, very fun. Theoretically speaking, the ability here to go, Mantike into Silvally, into Gyarados is really, really cool. One thing I would change about this deck specifically is like maybe just playing Misty. Like you can play Misty as long as you have a water type Pokemon on the board, you can play Misty and then, you know, even if you don't get any tails, even if it's completely useless, it still satisfies, the supporter condition for the Brave Buddy attacks. And most of the time, we are going to have a Magikarp / Gyarados on the board, right? So I actually really like this deck. I think that there's a lot to it. I would personally just play like 2 Misties just in case we get maybe a couple energies that we can set up on that Gyarados and maybe go Silvally into Gyarados. That could be definitely really, really fun here. A lot of Pokemon, more Pokemon than you typically see in a Silvally deck. I see the Irida in here. That does make a little bit of sense as well. But because we're playing so many Pokemon, it does make, you know, the Gyarados thing just a little bit less consistent, or rather the Silvally aspect of it less consistent because you need a supporter card to use the full effect, right? So no other sort of draw engine or draw support here. It's a really cool really cool deck list, a really cool strategy, something that I would maybe like to test a little bit more. So definitely super cool. Shout out to Sixth Star. He again had a nice little run here, beat a Slowking deck, beat Espeon Sylveon, beat Guzzlord twice, and then ended up losing to a Poison Guzzlord and a Buzzwole, right? So definitely one of my favorite decks of all time. I just really love this deck. I really do. Shout out to Silvally. I think that Silvally's been honestly one of the better Pokemon all season, which I think is pretty funny. And I really like it. Most people play it Lightning, but why not play Water? You know, I think that there's definitely so many, like there's so much potential with Silvally moving forward just because of it being a colorless Pokemon. And it's like a 6-card package that can really get fit into like anything, right? 2 Type Null, 2 Silvally, 2 Gladion. You can kind of pair it with like almost anything. Definitely one of my favorite decks for sure. Next up though, we have Sudeep P or Sudeep P. I don't know how to say the name. He was playing Altaria Silvally, right? So playing Grass, Water, and Fighting Energy, super cool. But yeah, this is like, you know, the Turbo Silvally, Turbo Altaria stuff that we saw previously, like a couple seasons ago when Altaria was released, I believe in A4. Altaria is not a bad card. It functions very, very similarly to Silvally. Instead of doing 50 and then 50 more if you have a supporter card, it does 40 but 60 more if you have multiple different types of energies attached, right? So playing Grass, playing Water, playing Fighting, and then playing, you know, Fire and Lightning baby Pokemon, you're guaranteed to have multiple different energy types basically on these Pokemon. And you're effectively just playing like double Turbo Silvally, like effectively. actually. Altaria does have no weakness, and it has a 10 more HP, which is pretty cool. So 100 hitting for 120 with red. We have Giovanni. Like, this is definitely not a bad aggro deck. And again, these sort of single prize archetypes that can 2-hit KO potentially mega Pokemon pretty often are going to be exceptionally interesting next season. So something like this, something to keep your eye on. It's been a while since we've really seen Altaria, but again, this player did go 4-3. Most of these players went 4-3. Just missing out on Top Cut. One of my favorites. I mean, this is just a really, really fun deck. One of the all-timers. I just really like something like this. You know, these are like unique stuff. Like, how often do you really get to see decks like this? You know what I mean? But at the tournament series, you know, we're lucky enough to get so many great players playing really unique, cool deck lists that are good. Like, you got to understand, like, sure, are there better decks than the decks that we're talking about in this video? Maybe, yeah, right? But like, the idea is that nobody's really playing these decks, so they're just underrated in general. You know, if 30% of the tournament was playing any of these decks, I'm sure they would be like really high up on the standings. Like, they're not bad, you know what I mean? So it's that typical sort of decision of like, is a deck good because a lot of people are playing it, or are a lot of people playing the deck because it's good? And I think it's a little bit of both. Something like a Suicune, you know, that had a 46% win rate in 2 weeks ago was the most played deck. So it's like, is it really that good, or are people just sort of playing it because they think it's really good? You know, decks like this definitely have a lot of potential. They just haven't really caught on. And that's why I want to make videos like this. I want to highlight, you know, decks that are meta decks. They are strong decks. They just aren't popular. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. It definitely is kind of a weird facet. But anyway, shout out to Sudeep. I have no idea. From India. Massive congratulations, man. Thanks for playing 4-3. Lastly, though, we have Skarmory. Yeah, let's go. Raflover from Spain. He was playing Wigglytuff Skarmory. Yeah, this is, again, one of my favorites. So, you know, Skarmory is interesting. It actually is one of the few Pokemon that has a winning matchup spread into Suicune. Again, this weekend, nobody played Suicune. But here we go. I just downloaded the deck for some reason. We have Wigglytuff and Skarmory. What's awesome about this deck is that we're playing 2 copies of every card. We have only 10 different cards in the deck. And why not, right? 2 copies of Leaf just to get at Wigglytuff out of the active spot. We've got Jasmine, we got Potion, we have Cyrus, we have Steel Apron, we have Potion, we have Pokeball, we have Research. It's kind of like everything, right? I mean, a deck list like this seems extremely simple, extremely straightforward, but there are so many things in the game that are going to massively struggle with the Skarmory, with the Steel Apron, with Jasmine, with the healing from Wigglytuff. It's just really, really funny. Wigglytuff can deal damage, so it can effectively just get over Oricorio on itself really easily, which is pretty cool. Skarmory only does 70 damage, which can feel bad, but most of the time we are 2-hit KOing, right? The idea with Skarmory is that we can 2-hit KO a lot of Pokemon without getting 2-hit KO'd ourselves. And that sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, right? Skarmory is a Pokemon that gets absolutely destroyed by a number of different decks in the metagame, but completely walls a bunch of other decks, which I find to be just in general really, really interesting. Let's shout out to Skarmory, man. I mean, like, come on now. You know, it's Skarmory. It went 4-3. I think it's fun. You know, shout out, man. Shout out to Riflover. I got nothing else to say, Riflover. Nothing else to say other than it's Skarmory, Wigglytuff. And I think this Wigglytuff also is kind of a broken Pokemon, and we might see it also later on in future seasons. So, you know, the potential to kind of take like 60, 70 less damage, 80 even on a turn, and then heal 40 damage on the following turn is kind of crazy if you think about it. It really is. Anyway, this player here lost 3 games in a row to Turbo Arceus and then ended up just sort of beating a bunch of other funny decks. So, you know, again, it's all about like the matchup spread stuff. It really is. But either way, one of my favorites of the tournament. Big shout out to all these players. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment down below what you guys think of these decks, what you guys think of these types of videos. I've been trying to do them on a weekly basis again, because we are running our tournament series. Don't forget to go and play in the final showdown this coming weekend. The last tournament before B1. Pokemon Pocket will be changed forever. Before you know it, everything will be changed. Nothing will be the same. And this is the last opportunity to compete before all of those changes happen. Go ahead, register, link down in the description below, probably also in the comments. Yeah, let me know what you guys think. To be fair, we're just sort of coming up with content. I'm just trying to make videos here, have a good time, you know, make some, you know, showcase some interesting decks. We're just waiting for some news about B1. It really is releasing in 1 week, literally 7 days from now. So potentially tomorrow or in, you know, later this week, we get like a real announcement trailer for B1, which I just cannot wait. It's been so long since we got new cards, since the metagame was really shaken up, and I think that's going to happen dramatically as we kind of go into B1. So really excited for that. You guys got to stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I appreciate all of the support, guys. And we likely will be going live tonight on Twitch and on YouTube. So if you're watching this video today on October 22nd, on Wednesday, we will be going live tonight on YouTube and Twitch. Come join in. We'll hang out. We'll play some ranked battles. Who knows? Maybe we'll even play one of these decks in that we showcased in today's video. So let's get out of here, guys. Peace out. Have a good one. We'll see you guys later. And yeah. Bye.